Hello friends and strangers out there on the internet. Welcome back to my channel, Artur Reimagined. I just want to say, guys, before I start, you'll never ever hear me say subscribe to this channel, because I find that really annoying. So I'll never ever say to you subscribe to this channel. But I hope you enjoy the content. So, yeah, the weather, it looks like it might rain. So let me just show you the ahead there. I don't know if you can see much there. This is a little path that I use that kind of it's like a little shortcut, because it's quite a steep walk down. And I wouldn't walk this way in the winter, it would be too slippery. But in the summer it's just perfect, really. So this is going to be part 2 of the story of my friendship with the Norwegian artist called Jonas, who looked remarkably like Orson Welles. And I advise you to watch the first half, and I'll put a link in the description to that video. But I can give a quick recap. So basically, when I moved to Norway in 2004, in the first couple of years I made a friend with a Norwegian artist called Jonas, like I say. And he was what's known in a sort of capitalist, consumerist world. He would be seen as a successful artist because his paintings sold really, really well. I got to know him. He invited me to his studio in Oslo. He also has a studio, like a cabin, here in this part of Norway, in West Norway, Fjord Norway. And he invited me there as well. So we became friends. And he asked my opinion of his latest work. He knew by now that I had an academic background and he didn't. And so he wanted feedback. And I told him the truth, because for me, art is a sacred thing. You never ever lie about it. And I told him, I said, yeah, for me, they are a high quality art product. And anyway, a year after that, a year later, a couple of years later it was, I managed to do a couple of paintings now, because he actually hadn't seen my work at that time. And there was one painting in particular that he was really captured by. And it knocked him for 6 really, and sent him into a creative crisis, because for the first time in his life, I would say, that he actually saw art through different eyes, from a different perspective. He saw that art with meaning that had been put intentionally in there was very different than art that had no meaning. And he was really knocked for 6, and he asked me, how do you make the painting breathe like that? It's like a living thing. And I told him, it's because I put a piece of me in there, a piece of me soul. If we have souls, then I put a piece of that in. That's why paintings take so much out of me. And after that, Jonas saw me differently, I would say. His attitude towards me changed. But he did say that he would help me with my art career. By the way, I'm just going to show you this view, guys. As you can see, it's a bit cloudy, but it's warm. It's really warm. So he said to me, Artur, now this is why my channel is called Artur Reimagined, because my name is Arthur, but the Norwegians pronounce it Artur because they don't really use the letter H in their language. It's like they just don't use it, you know. So they leave the H out and they call me Artur. So that's why my channel's called Artur Reimagined, because in a way moving to Norway was a complete restart of my life. So anyway, back to Jonas. So he, as I say, he was completely knocked for six, and he told me that he would help my art career, because he said, Artur, in Norway it's very difficult for a foreign person to get a foothold in the art community, you know, because they tend to they tend to focus on their own artists, which, you know, in a way I kind of like that, you know, although it doesn't help me. You know, I kind of really liked it. I thought, well, yeah, you know, what's wrong with prioritising your own citizens? Just saw a car there I'm thinking of buying. So, like I say, it didn't help me, but Jonas said he would introduce me to gallery owners, because I mean, he knew. I think he just knew loads and loads and loads of gallery owners. So, you know, and I said I really appreciate that. And that's kind of where it ended in the last video. And the next part of part 2 is, I hope you carry on watching, because it's very, very interesting. Yeah, so part 2, we jump ahead now about 1 year, year and a half. So it's kind of like 2000 and yeah, it was the kind of like the beginning of 2008, and I started sending photographs out to galleries all over Oslo. And in the March of 2008, one of the galleries actually contacted me, got back to me. And the gallery owner offered to give me or exhibit my paintings for 1 month as part of a joint exhibition with 2 other artists. And this is what he did every year, basically. He would invite new artists to exhibit during the summer season to give them a foothold in the door. And it was an international gallery called Gallery Pingvin. And, you know, which, you know, I really appreciate that there are galleries like that that give, you know, artists from other countries a chance. So, and he particularly asked me, did I still have that painting that that Jonas loved? And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, I would particularly like that painting to be part of your exhibition. So I said, yeah, sure, I still have it. So, you know, considering what Jonas had said, you've got to understand that this was a big break for me. You know, it was like, it was just like a gift, you know. And in the September of 2008, there I was, hanging up my paintings in Gallery Penguin. And just as I'd finished hanging the paintings up, the owner came into me and he said, listen, just so you know, you probably won't sell anything. And, well, I was kind of a bit stunned by that, and I said, do you think I've put the prices too high? Because he let the artists set their own price. And I think he was taking 30% of whatever the painting sold for, which is kind of standard. I think it's more like 40% now. But in them days, he was taking 30%, which I thought was reasonable. So I kind of put my prices a little bit higher to kind of counteract that, if you know what I mean. And he said, no, I don't think your prices, they're probably a little bit high. He said, but it's okay. You know, they're very high quality work. He says, but you've obviously not heard the news. And I said, what news are you talking about?
The Dow tumbled more than 500 points after two pillars of the street tumbled over the weekend. Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old firm, filed for bankruptcy.
I don't think anyone really expected a bank as big as Lehman to be in a position that it's in now.
Brought down by bad mortgage investments, Lehman, which has 25,000 employees, will be liquidated.
I'm starting to find another job.
Meanwhile, Merrill Lynch, fearing it could be next, agreed in an act of desperation to a shotgun marriage with Bank of America. Merrill, the country's biggest brokerage with 60,000 employees, had been battered by nearly $50 billion in mortgage-related losses.
It is definitely a very, very difficult time, and it's not going to get better quickly.
I did hear that for the next couple of years, I would say, or maybe longer, that it was very, very difficult for artists and art galleries. You know, they really struggled. And I don't know if galleries closed, but I know that many galleries were really struggling, and artists just was wiped out. However, the gallery owner was really decent with me. You know, he said to me, "You've been really unlucky, Arthur," and I said, "Yeah, yeah, just a bit, you know." But he did say to me to carry on painting because he was willing to give me another chance in the future when the economy had recovered. So he said, I want you to keep painting, maybe 6 or 7 paintings of this bigger size, and contact me when you've done that in the future. So like I say, he was decent, you know, he was going to give me another chance. But, you know, I was devastated because it meant, you know, considering what Jonas had said of how difficult it was to get a foot in the door, here was my big break, completely destroyed. So, I mean, I'm not the only one. The 2008 crisis destroyed, you know, millions of lives. But that's how it affected me personally. I saw it as my career being over before it had even begun. So, 1 year went by, so now we're in 2009. Summer 2009, and he popped in to see me, and he told, you know, he didn't look good. He didn't look good at all. You know, Jonas was a very upbeat person, and generally very positive, I would say. But he looked, I mean, he was really down. He was, and we went into. He wanted to see my painting again, and he was telling me that he'd had exhibitions all over Norway, you know, right up at the top of Norway to the bottom, and he'd hardly sold a thing. People just aren't buying, Arthur, he said. So, you know, he was this artist who was famous for his selling, had sold nearly nothing. Not even his, you know, he had like small paintings, and not even those were selling. And so we stood there, you know, and I said, look, I'll go and get us a coffee. We'll have a sit down, you know. And he was stood looking at that painting. Again, you know, he loved this painting. And as I was going out the room, I looked back and another man walked into the gallery and he went straight over to that painting. So he's now stood next to Jonas, and I could hear them talking. Not that they were talking, but I heard this guy ask Jonas, he said to him, is this your painting? Have you done this? And Jonas said, no, it's Artur, he's the artist. So he looked back at me just as I was going out the door. So I came back over to him and he said, this is fabulous. Is it for sale? And as I got talking to him, Jonas said, I'll meet you in the cafe. So he left, and now I'm left talking to this guy. And he said to me, are you willing to sell it? And I said, well, not just now. So I explained to him that, well, you know, that I was gathering paintings for a future exhibition, and that these paintings, they take a long time to do. And I need at least 6 or 7 at this size. And so I can't really sell. And he said, what a shame, what a shame. He said, it's absolutely fabulous. And then, you know, we got talking and I found out that he had an engineering background, and he told me that he was visiting in the village in his sailboat, and he'd built this sailboat by hand, piece by piece. He'd done all the architect's drawings and you know, cut the pieces out and built it, and he invited me to come and have a look at it. So I went over to the quay area and he showed me this beautiful sailboat, you know. And I actually even took my daughter over to see it, and with his permission, and he took us down into below, and she was stunned how big it was. You know, it's deceiving when you see these sailboats. They don't look that big, and then you go below deck and it's like they've got bedrooms and kitchens and showers and things. It was really impressive, and he'd built by hand. So I was really impressed. Now jump ahead 1 year again. So now it's 2010, and this engineer guy came back again, and he asked if the painting was for sale, and I said, I'm sorry, yeah, I've got, as you can see, I've done more paintings, but I still can't sell. So, but what did happen was that I got to know him and his wife a lot better, you know, and well, to say that they was lovely people is an understatement, because they were just, you know, they were like really genuine, down-to-earth folk. That's the best way I can put it. And so I got to know them. And now jump ahead again to 2011. And by the way, guys, during this period of time, before I tell you what happened there, from after the 2008 crisis, during that period of the next few years, there was a lot of art collectors from Norway. I mean, these are real art collectors, and they were traveling around Norway, and you see, they knew that artists were struggling to sell. So they were going around and buying like high quality art for low prices. Because you see, they knew, didn't they? They knew that artists needed money. And a couple of those art collectors came into my gallery and told me that as they'd been traveling around, they noticed that many artists had given up. And you see, you've got to realise, haven't you, that when the economy is booming, like, people have a lot of disposable income, don't they? So art that doesn't really mean anything, that you're just going to buy to go with your sofa, you know, those people did really well. They were selling a lot. Whereas art with meaning, you know, it didn't really, it slowed down, but it was still selling because art collectors still bought. Just as a sidetrack here, I remember seeing an interview on the BBC, and they interviewed this art collector, and he was sat in his limousine, right? And he says to the art collector, you know, are you going to stop buying art, you know, while the financial crisis is on? And this art collector said, no, I'll probably sack my driver and drive me car myself for a while until the economy improves. So you see, this in a way is like interesting, isn't it? That meaningless art or decorative art sells when there's a lot of disposable income, but when the economy busts, like in 2008, well, people tighten their belts, don't they? The first thing that people stop buying is high quality things. You know, the luxury goods market is the first to fall. You know, luxury clothing, jewelry, art, all those things stop. People stop buying, you know, while the economy's bad. But genuine art collectors still, because they love art, that art gives them meaning, so they still continue to buy, although they're more careful, I would say. And anyway, a couple of these art collectors came into my gallery, and I did, God forgive me, sell a painting to one of these collectors. And I sold it for two reasons. One, because I was desperate for money, and two, it was actually a small painting like this, which was a sketch I did for a bigger painting. And so I let it go. And they loved that painting, but I'm sure that they was going to sell it later on for a profit, because that's what they do. That's like a dark side to the art world. But that's okay, you know, they have the right, you know, art, you don't have to sell your work to them, do you? So, and, you know, I still miss that painting, and, you know, I never actually did a large painting of that sketch. I never actually made a larger painting. Yeah, so like I was saying, in 2010, this sailboat guy, I'll call him a sailboat guy, and his wife, they returned here to my village in their sailboat, and of course they came in to see me, and we went to a cafe and had a talk. And then a husband, the engineer guy, he went out. I can't remember why he went, but I was left with his wife, and she said to me, you know, Arthur, we've come back again to ask you, are you willing to sell that painting? You know, my husband, he loves that painting, and, you know, he talks about it all the time. And it's not often that he's like that. And I could see in her eyes that she meant it. And I thought to myself, gosh, they really, you know, they really mean it. They want the painting, you know. And I thought, well, you know, what are you holding on for? You know, I can do more paintings, you know. So I said, okay, I'm willing to sell it. She said, really? Are you willing to sell it? And I said, yeah, I'm willing to sell it. And so she got up and she ran out, and about 5 minutes or so later she came back in and she said to me, my husband is crying because I'd let him buy the painting. I mean, this, you got to understand, guys, this guy was not like a softie. He was a realist, you know, he was down to earth realist. And this like emotionally affected him, that he was going to now own this painting. And then I knew in that instant when she told me that, I thought, this is the right thing to do, and these are the right people to have my painting. And so at the end of that season, so that it would be like, I think it was like October, I drove to the house, which is about a 2-hour drive from here, maybe an hour and a half. I'm not good at distances, guys. And you know, they had a really I mean, it was a house to die for. It was a lovely house. And you know, I brought the painting in, and he showed me he'd made a special place in one of his rooms for my painting, and he'd put spotlights up and everything. So I took a little shot of him in front of the painting, and I knew that this couple would love this painting and cherish it as much as I did, you know. And for an artist, you can't really ask for more than that, can you? And you know, I remain friends with these people, this couple, you know, just lovely people, really. And so jump ahead now to one more year. Now we're in 2011, and in the summer season, and Jonas came back, and he went straight into the gallery to see that painting, and of course he saw that it was now gone. He came over to me and he says, have you sold the painting? And I said, yeah. He said, how much did you sell it for? Well, to make it easier, so you don't have to kind of Google it, it was about $15,000. And well, to this day, I don't know what Jonas thought about this, but that was the last time I ever saw him. And you know, he wasn't good, guys. He was really down. His work was just not selling, and his health was now, you know, it was now suffering with his health. You know, I'm not quite sure what it was at the time, but you know, he didn't look good, and that was the last time I saw him. And you see, here's the thing, that engineer, the sailboat guy, you see, in my painting, he saw that I put the same kind of love into that painting that he had put into making his sailboat. When he was in his sailboat, every time he was on deck or below deck, he knew every single piece of that sailboat, didn't he? Because he'd made it by hand. He knew every single piece, just as I knew every single stroke in my painting, because every stroke on that painting had meaning behind it. And he could see that. And you see, when you create something with meaning, it has truth to it, doesn't it? And every kind of truth has power. And we can't really measure it with any kind of technology, but I firmly believe that it's there. Otherwise, why would these things happen? And you see, this putting meaning with every stroke, that's the value right there. See, meaning gives feeling, and feeling gives like value to your life. And this is why art is a reflection of life, because you see, just as a painting that has no meaning is meaningless, a person who has no meaning in their lives will live a meaningless life. See, there's more to life than money. If money's important, but it should not be the meaning, it should not be the reason why you exist. Mankind existed long before the invention of money. If you put your faith in money like a religion, it's going to let you down at some point, just like in 2008, it let the whole world down. So, I learned this a long time ago. You've got to find meaning in your life. And for me, art is the reason why, it gives me my reason to exist. It's my meaning in my life. So, that's what I'm trying to say with this this video, guys, that find meaning in your life. Because if you find meaning, then when disasters come and go, it won't be the end of the world, and at the end of your life, you will feel like you lived a life. You made choices in life rather than responding to money. Because if you live for money, then you're just responding and reacting to what money does. You're not really making choices. And that's a life with meaning. You're making choices because of that meaning. I'm babbling here, but I hope you get what I'm saying. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about this story. So yeah. So in the next video I'm going to do like an explanation of what that particular painting is about. And I think even if you're not really an art interested person, you might find it interesting to see what I mean by putting meaning in there. It might just open your eyes to see art in a different way. All right, guys, thanks for sticking with it. Appreciate that. I hope it sets some thoughts for you. So, as usual, take care, give care, and be careful out there. And don't be strangers, and visit me again on Artur Reimagined. See you guys.